U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made a surprise trip to Ukraine's capital as Washington unveiled nearly $2.7 billion in new support for the war-torn country and for others suffering from the crisis. Now, this was the American diplomat's second trip to Kyiv since Russia's invasion. And Blinken's visit to Ukraine coincides with a visit by U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to Germany. He is there for talks with more than 50 countries on long-term support measures for Ukraine. Issues such as producing and restocking arms will be raised, as well as how countries can work together to train Ukrainian forces. Kyiv has been asking for more heavy weapons from its allies as it pursues a counteroffensive in the south.
Now we're seeing the demonstrable success of our common efforts on the battlefield. And every day we see the resolve of the allies and partners worldwide who are helping Ukraine resist Russia's illegal, imperial, and indefensible war of conquest. And we must evolve as the fight evolves.
Julia Chapman joins us live now from Kyiv. Julia, firstly, why the secrecy over Mr. Blinken's visit, and is he going to be meeting up with President Zelensky?
Well, for one part, this is also, of course, the visit has come unexpectedly for security reasons. We don't yet know whether Antony Blinken will be meeting with President Zelensky. There was no information about his visit published beforehand. What we do know is that Mr. Blinken has been visiting the U.S. Embassy here in Kyiv. He went to a hospital where children were being treated after suffering injuries in areas that Russians have been shelling. And he is also due to meet his Ukrainian counterpart, the Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, later today. We don't yet know, though, whether he will be meeting the president himself. As you say, this is Antony Blinken's second visit to Kyiv since the war began. One U.S. official said that this was a consequential moment in the war in Ukraine, and that is why Antony Blinken is here today. He has made this visit to coincide with a new tranche of funding that has been announced by the United States to give military aid to Ukraine, continuing on from what they have been supporting Ukraine in the months that have gone by. But certainly we are starting to see the tides turning somewhat in the conflict with the counteroffensive that Ukraine began last week. We heard Lloyd Austin saying there that this is an important moment now. There are starting to be the signs that the support being given by Western countries to Ukraine might be making a difference on the battlefield. And that is why Antony Blinken has chosen this moment to come here and show that the U.S. is still continuing to support the country's war effort, even 6.5 months now into the conflict, and amid fears that some of the Western countries who have been providing so much aid could be running out of steam in that support. But U.S. Showing that that is not the case, at least not so far.
And let's talk about that $2.7 billion support from the U.S. How significant is this amount? And I guess more importantly, how will it help Ukraine at this point in the war?
So not all of that money is going to Ukraine. Ukraine will get $1.7 billion or so from the United States. It was announced by Lloyd Austin that Ukraine would get $675 million in direct military aid. So that will take the shape of howitzers, artillery munitions, and anti-tank systems, among other support for the military. But then there was $2 billion US dollars that was announced, not just for Ukraine, but also for countries in the Balkans, the Baltics, and the Caucasus, as well as other parts of Eastern Europe, to give these countries some foreign military funding to allow them to help counter any kind of threat from Russia. So the U.S. showing quite a lot of support for Ukraine. Ukraine will get half of that number, but other countries as well will be given more backup to help counter any kind of aggression that they may be under threat of from Russia. Part of that will go to them being able to buy U.S. military equipment using that funding, so a boost to the U.S. defense industry as well. But this is the U.S. saying that it wants to help not just Ukraine, but also many countries that could be at risk of similar aggression that they have been seeing here in this country.
Good to know. Thanks very much for that report. Julia Chapman there, live from Kyiv.